Picture this: Rome, the year 39 CE, amidst a lavish imperial banquet. You are seated at a grand table, your wife beside you, surrounded by hundreds of your fellow senators. The air is filled with soft music as wine flows freely into gleaming silver cups. Then, without warning, the emperor rises, a chilling smile playing on his lips as he points directly at your wife. His command is simple and terrifying. She will accompany me. Imperial guard seize her, and as they drag her away, she screams your name. You are frozen, utterly powerless, for you know that if you so much as move, if you utter a word of protest, if your face even registers a frown, you will be executed on the spot. She vanishes behind a heavy curtain, swallowed by the shadows of the palace. For the next 30 agonizing minutes, the only sounds are the muffled moans, the desperate screams, and the cruel, mocking laughter from beyond the wall. When she is finally returned to the hall, the emperor calmly takes his seat directly across from you, adjusts his tunic, and with cold detachment begins to recount, in graphic detail, the ordeal he just inflicted upon your wife, for all to hear, especially you. Every other senator in the room lowers their gaze. A suffocating silence falls, as each man knows that next time, it could be his wife, his family, his honor. This is not a work of fiction. This exact scene played out dozens of times during the reign of Caligula, and the public violation of senators' wives was merely one of his many depraved rituals. This man was more than a cruel emperor. He was a monster who weaponized his power, turning it into a grand ceremony of humiliation and transforming his palace into a theater of perversion and bloodshed. He proclaimed himself a living god, compelling all of Rome to worship his image, and devised torments so grotesque that even the hardened Roman historians of the era refused to document the full, horrifying details. Today, we delve into the 7 most depraved rituals of Caligula, the abhorrent practices that Rome desperately tried to erase from its memory. These are the secrets so disturbing that they represent the very definition of dark history, barely whispered about in mainstream accounts. By the end of this journey, you will understand precisely why his name became synonymous with absolute evil, because his actions were not born of madness, but of a cold, calculated perversion. I'm Crown and Dagger, and this is the story of what truly transpired. Have you ever wondered why history books detail Caligula's military campaigns but conveniently omit his perversions? It is because the unvarnished truth is deeply unsettling, because the reality of power has always been far more grotesque than what we are taught. Every week, Crown and Dagger unearths the most disturbing chapters of our dark history, the stories the world would rather forget. If you crave the unfiltered truth, show your support by hitting that like button and subscribing, because the events we are about to uncover are far more brutal. To truly grasp the depths of Caligula's depravity, one must first comprehend the sheer scale of his power. We return to Rome, the year 37 CE. The Roman Empire was the largest in the known world, with 60 million souls under its dominion, and at its apex sat Caligula, a man who was, for all intents and purposes, a living god. At just 24 years of age, he wielded power with no checks and no balances, absolute authority over the life and death of millions. He had been a keen observer of his predecessor, Tiberius, who ruled through terror from his secluded island palace. He had witnessed his own uncle, Claudius, being mercilessly mocked for his stammer and limp, and from these observations, he learned a critical lesson. He learned that in Rome, humiliation was a fate worse than death itself. Roman society was meticulously constructed upon a foundation of honor your times dignitas asterisk, your public reputation. The name of your family was valued more highly than your own life. To lose your honor was to suffer a social death. Caligula understood this societal pressure point better than any emperor who had come before. Therefore, he engineered a system where remaining silent in the face of utter humiliation became your only viable path to survival. To protest meant certain death. To stay silent meant living with the shame. There was no escape. But his most potent weapon was not the legions of the army. It was something far more insidious. It was the Roman honor system itself. According to Suetonius, the Roman historian who was granted access to the imperial archives, Caligula orchestrated these banquets of humiliation at least 40 times over his 4-year reign. That averages out to one such vile spectacle every single month. It is estimated that more than 200 senatorial families were systematically ruined by his method of psychological and sexual blackmail. These were not random acts of cruelty. They were systematic, meticulously calculated, and designed not merely to punish individual senators, but to shatter the will of Rome's entire ruling class. Consider the diabolical genius of this strategy. Every senator who witnessed another man's degradation was instantly made an accomplice, because if he failed to report the incident, he was complicit in the crime. Yet, if he did report it, he would be admitting he stood by and did absolutely nothing. Either path he chose, he was utterly and completely trapped. Caligula had turned Rome's most powerful men into prisoners of their own shame, and this was just the beginning. Pause for a second and think about this. How many stories like this were completely erased because they succeeded in burying them? What you're hearing now barely exists in the history books. Imagine what they did manage to hide, because what's coming next is worse. The system was simple but brutal. Caligula would invite 5070 senators to his banquets. Attendance was mandatory. To decline meant treason, and treason meant death during dinner. He would choose a wife, have her dragged to a private chamber. The guests would hear everything through the thin curtain. 30 minutes later, he would return and describe in detail what he had just done in front of her husband, in front of everyone. But here's what made it even more twisted. Sometimes he would rate them loudly, comparing wives to each other, announcing which senator's wife was better. The psychological warfare was perfect, because now it wasn't just about humiliation. It was about competition, about ranking, about turning these men's wives into trophies, to be scored according to records preserved in the Vatican archives. One of these victims had a name, Annia Thrasea. She was the wife of Senator Marcus Silenus, 26 years old, 2 children, noble family, going back 4 generations. One night, in August of 39 CE, Caligula pointed at her. What happened next was recorded in the memoirs of Seneca, who was present that night. He wrote, "The emperor took her as one takes spoils of war. When he returned, he described her body in terms that would make a prostitute blush. Her husband Marcus sat frozen. His face betrayed nothing, but I saw his hands beneath the table. His knuckles were white. He was gripping his knife so hard. I thought he would drive it through his own palm." Marcus Silanus never spoke in the Senate again. 3 months later, he committed suicide. His death was recorded as natural causes in the official records, but Seneca wrote the truth. He took his own life because the emperor had already taken his honor. This wasn't about sex, this was about power, about proving that no institution, no marriage, no bond was stronger than the emperor's will. But violating married women wasn't enough for Caligula. He wanted something even more perverse: the destruction of innocence as entertainment. According to Diocletian, a Greek historian writing in the 3rd century CE, with access to Senate records, Caligula organized at least 12 public auctions of virgin daughters from noble families. Here's how it worked. Caligula would identify families that had offended him. Sometimes the offense was real, a senator voting against him, a family refusing to donate to his building projects. Other times the offense was imagined. It didn't matter. He would have their daughters, typically aged 14 to 17, brought to the palace under the pretense of imperial service. The families had no choice. To refuse was treason. These girls would then be presented at evening gatherings attended by Rome's elite, wealthy merchants, foreign diplomats, and most sickeningly, other senators, sometimes, including the girls' own relatives. Caligula would auction them off, starting bid 1,000 denarii, roughly equivalent to a soldier's annual salary. But here's the twisted part. The highest bidder wasn't buying her freedom. They were buying the right to publicly take her virginity, in front of the crowd while Caligula watched and laughed. One documented case involves a girl named Drusilla Minor, not to be confused with Caligula's favorite sister of the same name. She was 15, daughter of Senator Appius Claudius. According to administrative tablets discovered in the ruins of Pompeii and now housed in the Naples National Archaeological Museum, her auction was held on March 18, 40 CE. She was purchased by a Syrian merchant for 400 denarii. What happened next isn't fully recorded, but the tablet notes that she was returned to her family. A mere 3 days later, official records state she was returned, a chilling euphemism for the grim reality of her fate. In the aftermath, her own father would never again utter her name. Exiled to a secluded family estate, she was effectively erased from history, her existence a stain of shame too profound to acknowledge. Some families, desperate to spare their daughters a similar fate, scrambled to arrange swift marriages to trusted allies, hoping to render them ineligible for the emperor's perverse auctions. And Caligula's reaction to this defiance He simply nullified the marriages with an imperial edict and seized the young women regardless. This was more than mere depravity. It was a calculated campaign to dismantle Rome's elite through public, sexual degradation, a truly grim chapter in our dark history. Just take a moment to absorb that. Let me know in the comments what you think, because the next revelation might just shatter your perception entirely. Caligula's penchant for spectacle spilled over into the grand arena, but with a twist that defied all Roman tradition. The historian Suetonius recounts that Caligula would compel esteemed senators to enter the ring and fight as gladiators. They weren't pitted against trained professionals, but against one another, or even more horrifyingly, against wild beasts. Yet, that wasn't the most depraved aspect of the spectacle. The true sickness lay in the audience he assembled. He commanded the senators' wives and daughters to occupy the front row seats, making their attendance compulsory. They were forced to witness their own husbands, fathers, and brothers battling for their very lives, often to a gruesome end. And should any of the women dare to look away, to shut their eyes, or show the slightest hint of anguish, Caligula's guards would drag her into the bloody sand as well. One surviving account details the ordeal of a senator, Quintus Pomponius, who was made to face a starved leopard, armed with nothing more than a crude wooden club. Watching from her seat, directly across the arena, was his wife, Julia. She was 8 months pregnant. For 11 agonizing minutes, Quintus fought for his life before the beast ripped open his throat. Historical records confirm that Julia went into premature labor that very night. Tragically, both she and her infant perished. Caligula attended neither of their funerals, but he was quick to confiscate their entire estate the following day. Caligula's madness escalated when he proclaimed himself a living god, not in a symbolic sense, but as a literal deity. Yet, his goal wasn't merely to be worshipped. He sought to defile the very essence of worship itself. He erected a grand temple to his own divinity on Palatine Hill, and inside, he installed a life-sized golden statue of himself in the guise of Jupiter. He then commanded that the wives of senators serve as his temple priestesses. But what did this service entail? According to the fragmented writings of Philo of Alexandria, who was in Rome around the year 40, these priestesses were compelled to engage in sacred rites with male devotees at the temple. These were, in fact, ritualized acts of intimacy, performed within a holy temple as a form of worship to Caligula. Wealthy Romans, seeking to gain the emperor's favor, would make substantial donations, and in return, they would be granted time with these priestesses, women who, only months earlier, were counted among the most esteemed and honorable matrons of Rome. The diabolical brilliance of this scheme, a true stain on Rome's dark history, was its built-in deniability. Caligula wasn't coercing them into a life of shame. They were merely serving the divine emperor in his sacred temple. It was framed as a holy obligation. Any woman who dared to refuse would be charged with sacrilege, a crime for which the only punishment was death. Caligula had a passion for games, yet his contests were never about skill or competition. They were instruments of pure degradation. One of his preferred pastimes, as documented by several historians, was a cruel spectacle known as the crawling game. He would stage magnificent banquets for hundreds of guests, serving the most exquisite food and wine the empire could offer. Then, midway through the feast, he would clap his hands, a signal for the doors to be locked and barred. He would then announce the start of the game. Every senator present was forced onto their hands and knees to crawl towards him as if they were dogs. The final man to reach his throne would be put to death immediately. Picture it. Venerable men in their 60s and 70s, decorated war heroes, former consuls, and respected grandfathers all scrambling frantically across polished marble floors, clambering over one another in a desperate bid not to be last, all while Caligula lounged on his throne, laughing and casually eating grapes. A recorded incident from the year 38 tells of Senator Lucius Vitellius, a distinguished man who had once commanded legions in Germania, who ripped his fine toga in his haste to shove past younger men. His knees left bloody streaks on the marble, his honor utterly destroyed before the very men who once saluted him, a truly bleak moment in this era's dark history. When he at last arrived at the emperor's throne, panting and broken, Caligula forced him to wait. He made the old senator kneel there, trembling, as the emperor slowly and deliberately finished his cup of wine. Then, with a chilling smile, he would point to his own sandals. The victor's reward? The honor of licking the emperor's feet. That was the grand prize. Even Lucius Vitellius, a celebrated war hero of Rome, was forced to kneel and perform this act, as the alternative was a swift execution, and he desperately wanted to see his grandchildren grow up. Certain accounts from this chapter of Rome's dark history suggest Caligula devised an even more twisted version, forcing the wives of senators to compete against each other instead. And the prize for their degradation? Their husband's life. The choice was brutally simple: abase yourself like an animal, or watch the man you love be put to death. Yet, perhaps the most psychologically ruinous of all Caligula's rituals was the most deceptively simple: the midnight summons. Without warning, Caligula would dispatch his guards to a senator's residence. In the dead of night, with no explanation offered, they would deliver a single message: the emperor summons you. The senator would have mere minutes to dress and be escorted away. On some occasions, the senator would arrive to find Caligula hosting a lavish banquet, where he'd be compelled to eat, drink, and feign laughter, all while toasting the emperor's health as if it were a joyous celebration. He had to smile, even as his heart hammered against his ribs, consumed by the thought that this could be his final meal. On other nights, the scene was far worse. Caligula would be in his private chambers, with the senator's own wife. The husband would be forced to bear witness, sometimes for minutes, sometimes for what felt like an eternity, with guards positioned to ensure his gaze never wavered. And then there were the most terrifying nights of all. Caligula would simply be sitting in silence, staring intently at the senator for hours on end, before dismissing him with a casual, unnerving smile. "You may leave now." No reason given, no charges leveled, no accusations made. The unspoken message was deafening: "I can summon you at my whim. Your very existence is mine to command." According to the historian Philo, one particular senator was summoned 7 times in a single month. Each summons was for a different sadistic purpose, or for no discernible reason at all. By the end of it, the man had ceased sleeping completely, choosing instead to sit by his door through the night. He remained fully dressed, just waiting for the inevitable knock. On the nights it didn't come, he found no peace. On the nights it did, he cursed the day he was born. The psychological toll of this campaign of terror was absolutely devastating. The senators were trapped in a state of perpetual fear, unable to sleep, unable to ever truly relax. Every unexpected knock on the door could be the Praetorian Guard. Many developed symptoms we would now identify as post-traumatic stress disorder, severe paranoia, and chronic insomnia. Some were driven to complete madness, and that was precisely the point. In this chapter of Rome's dark history, Caligula didn't need to kill his rivals. He just needed them broken. But Caligula's ultimate depravity wasn't a single ritual, but an entire system designed to make everyone complicit. If you witnessed the violation of a senator's wife and remained silent, you became guilty by association. If you attended his auctions but failed to bid, you were insulting the emperor. Refusing the temple's sacred companions was an act of sacrilege. Every single ritual was engineered to implicate you. It was designed to drag you into the mire of his corruption, ensuring that even after his death, you could never speak out without revealing your own part in it. He masterfully transformed Rome's entire ruling class into willing accomplices in their own humiliation. And that, more than any individual act of brutality, was his true masterpiece of perversion. For many decades, historians dismissed these accounts as little more than exaggerated Roman propaganda, crafted to demonize a despised emperor. That all changed in 1987, when archaeologists digging deep beneath Rome's Palatine Hill unearthed something truly chilling: a hidden chamber with marble walls. Carved directly into the stone were 23 names of women. Beside each name was a date and a Latin phrase: silentium est mors, silence is death. These were the names of the senators' wives whom Caligula had subjected to public violation. Their own hands had secretly etched their names into the stone, a desperate plea for someone, someday, to remember what was done to them. The lead archaeologist, Dr. Marco Bellini, declared that this discovery proves the ancient sources weren't exaggerating at all. If anything, their descriptions of this dark history were far too gentle. 2,000 years later, we finally found their names, not because Rome chose to remember them, but because these women refused to let themselves be forgotten. And now, you know their story. So why is this piece of history so important? Because the tale of Caligula teaches us a truly terrifying lesson. Absolute power doesn't merely corrupt, it utterly perverts. It transforms suffering into a spectator sport, humiliation into state policy, and silence into the only means of survival. And what's most insidious is how it normalizes this horror, making people forget there was ever another way. The philosopher Seneca, who endured Caligula's reign, once wrote, "A tyrant doesn't need to eliminate everyone. He only needs everyone to fear they are next on the list." And Seneca was absolutely right. But here is the most chilling part of it all. This weaponized system of silence, forged in shame, did not perish with the Roman Empire. It survives today in every institution where individuals remain silent, knowing that exposure would lead to their social ruin. In any organization where shame is used to shield the powerful, Caligula may have died 2,000 years ago, but his strategy, a grim chapter from our dark history, is still alarmingly effective. Caligula's reign lasted a mere 4 years, yet in that short span, he annihilated more than 200 families and systematically humiliated the most influential men in Rome. He transformed the imperial palace into a stage for bloodshed and depravity, and when he was finally assassinated in January of 41 CE, a collective sigh of relief swept through all of Rome. But the profound damage had already been done. He had proven a terrifying truth, that absolute power can corrupt even the most honorable men, turning them into silent participants in their own degradation. This is the kind of dark history the official textbooks seldom dare to mention, the true perversion that festers behind absolute power. If you believe these truths should be brought to light, uncensored, then subscribe to Crown and Dagger. I'm your host, Crown and Dagger, and this is the history that was hidden. But believe me, Caligula was not the only Roman emperor who wielded intimacy as a political weapon. In fact, there was another who did something even more depraved, involving his own mother. Do you want to hear that story? Let me know down in the comments. And if you've journeyed this far into the shadows with me, hit that like button so I know you crave more tales like this. I'll see you in the next historical nightmare.